Hello, I'm Bob Peters. I'm your host here on Salute, and I have with me one of the greatest generation, Mr. Ken Taylor, Lieutenant, World War II. I want to welcome you to the show, sir.
Thank you.
I learned about you through another gentleman I had on who's also with the Distinguished Flying Cross, Dean Vetter. He told me about you, and I've read the articles on you, and I'm thrilled to have you on the show to talk about your experiences. And I want to thank you for coming.
It's nice to be here.
Tell me a little about yourself. Where were you born?
Well, I'm from the state of Washington. I was born in Puyallup, Washington, which is about 10 miles from where my plane that I flew overseas was built. The factory was, I didn't know that at the time when I was born, of course. But, and I was grown up in a little town called Squim, Washington. The population was 600 population. And lived there with my father had a theater there, motion picture theater. And I lived there until I got out of high school. I went to college at the University of Washington. And when the war broke out, I was in my second year of college. And I enlisted in a reserve program there. And we knew we were going to be called up, but no when. But at the end of one of the semesters, they told us in the reserve that we could stay in school that rest of that semester if they volunteered to go into service active duty then. Well, 2 weeks later, after we all volunteered, they called us all in. It was a ploy to get us all in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went in with about 25 fraternity brothers. We all went in one group. And I'd had 2 years of ROTC in the school because that was mandatory then. And of course, that's where they sent me to Camp Walters, Texas, the infantry. And I was there about 2 weeks, and I said, got to be something better than this. They called them gravel grinders. Anyway, so they had a directive out that you could transfer to the Air Corps for flight training if you pass the physical and the mental and all that stuff. So I was the first one to volunteer for that, and I passed, and I qualified for a pilot, navigator, bombardier. I had my pick what I wanted to do. And at that time, they had plenty of pilots, and they were washing them out, and they weren't washing any others out, because as long as you could drop a bomb, you were okay. So anyway, so I volunteered for bombardier training because if you washed out of cadets, you had to go back to the infantry. So I didn't want to take any chances. So I ended up going through my basic training, and well, I had 16 weeks at North Dakota State College, a pre-flight school. 16 weeks in Santa Ana, California, in pre-flight school. 8 weeks of air-to-ground gunnery school in Las Vegas, which was a population of 4,000 people then.
Believe it or not. Changed quite a bit.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
We had B-17s, we had air-to-ground gunnery school, where we practiced shooting objects on the ground and then on targets in the air. And then I went to advanced bombardiers training in Roswell, New Mexico, where I had 16 weeks there where you learned to drop the bombs and all that. And I graduated there in September 1944. And they made me an instructor. And that's the last thing I wanted to do, is stay in Roswell, New Mexico the rest of the war. So a week later, I was on my way to RTU training in B-29s. I volunteered for overseas duty in B-29s. Ended up taking 16 weeks of training in that. And we ended up going to Guam. I started my missions in Guam.
Yeah.
And as you say, I ended up with 30 at the end of the war.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell our viewers a little bit about you and some of your awards that you received. You were you said 30 missions. You You flew over Tokyo, which I'm anxious to hear about that. But you had the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Presidential Citation, Aztec Pacific Service Medal, 2 Bronze Stars, the American Theater Medal, World War II Victory Medal, 1 Iwo Jima Service Medal, plus 3 Air Medals.
Right.
And if you put them all on your shirt today, you probably couldn't walk. I salute you, sir. You're highly decorated, and I want to hear more about your story. The B-29, you were a bombardier on the B-29.
Right.
You had the Norton.
Norton bombicide.
That was made in Connecticut, my home state. Yeah. And you were. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were told if it ever went down, you had to destroy it, right?
The first part of the war, but after the war went on, it wasn't even mentioned, actually. The first part of the war, it was a very top secret. In fact, when I was in cadets, you still had to guard it, have a gun with you when you went out with the flight line, the bomb, to practice. But it came off after that. They didn't pay much attention to it because the war was twiddling along, didn't seem to be a problem. But it was a very good bomb site as long as you put everything into it, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the crew and I here from Lakefront TV, Dr. Anna Marie and Todd, the man in the other room, and I flew on the B-29 Fifi, and Dr. Anna Marie sat in that same seat like where you used to sit, right in the very front of the plane.
That was my office.
Yeah, that was your office. Yes.
Yeah, well, they put it, that Norton bombicide, was about this big. It had a thing in there to look through. And it had the knobs on this side. You had to work them like this. It wasn't like this. You had to work them, this one backwards, just to focus the crosshairs. If you had to preset airspeed, the weight of the bomb, the height, barometric pressure, and all that. You preset that in as much as you can. They give you that information before you take off. And then you correct it with the hand things. And if you get the cross like that on the target and it doesn't move, you're going to hit the target. If it wanders off a little bit, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
So you have to get that thing synchronized with what you're aiming at. If you do that, you're within, they figure within 200 feet of the target, you're doing pretty good. And I graduated from advanced bombardier school with an average of 130 feet, I think, which was pretty good. They said 200 was average, so I was a little bit below that.
Yeah, and you did a lot of daylight bombing, which was really kind of dangerous. But you said you landed in Guam, and is that where most of your missions came out of?
All of them, yeah. I was at Northfield there. They had, let me tell you a little bit about the 20th Air Force. It was formed from scratch in June of 1944, principally to demolish Japan proper. And its arsenal was the B-29 built especially for that job. So they actually got it overseas about the latter part of 1944. Flew out of India, and it was too far. They had to go over the hump, and they had all kinds of problems. Then they moved to China. They had all kinds of problems. So the main effort on the B-29 program started in, I always say March 10th when they bombed Tokyo. That's when I think it was 150,000 people were killed, more than in Hiroshima. And it was a very successful incendiary mission. And then they found out that then that's the only way they're going to beat the Japs is to burn them out, because they were actually not only had factories set up, but the people were building things in their homes, doing war work in their homes. So they took care of a lot of things by taking care of their homes also, besides the factories.
Yeah.
And when that first mission was, I always call it the first mission, was on March 10th of 1945, and they surrendered on August 15th, 1945. Less than 6 months later, They were all through.
Yeah.
And they had no intentions before that first mission to do it, because that's why we took Okinawa for an invasion point into mainland of Japan. And if that had happened, there'd been, I figure, a couple million people killed.
Yeah, that's a lot about the history of World War II. Is that they took a lot of the Marines and the Army took a lot of these islands to make them for runways because they didn't have the planes like we have today, where they can leave the United States, bomb, and come right back.
Yeah.
Then you had to have airfields and you had to have supply depots and all that. So yeah.
But the B-29 was the only plane, actually, other than Doolittle's planes, in 1942, was it? Bombed Japan until
B-25.
right at the last part. The Navy came in because they could go in and strafe and stuff. But we actually did the dirty work with it. Incendiaries were the big thing. The night bombing.
Yeah.
All our incendiary missions was done at night because it was you could see places that weren't bombing. You were just saturating the ground with fire, and you just go over a target individually, not in formation, at about 12 to 14,000 feet, and pick a spot on the ground that wasn't burning and drop your bombs. And daylight missions were done on demonstration for airfields, factories, harbors, and we flew at 35,000 feet there in formation, with 500-pound bombs, 20,000-pound bomb loads.
Wow.
And it was, that altitude was pretty tough because in Japan, during part of the year, they had 100-mile winds up there. So it was tough to get your bombs to go on target with that much wind.
Yeah, tell me about you were telling me about the amount of planes they lost and 200 and some odd men.
Yeah, we in my bomb group, which is a bomb group consists of about 35 planes, and there's 11 or 12 planes in each squadron, and we lost 22 planes out of the 36. Of course, they had replacements come in.
Yeah,
and there was no survivors on any of them. And what was I going to say? What was I going to say though?
it was 249 men. You told me.
249.
Yeah, you lost 249 men.
Lost.
But tell me about your plane. You had a name for it.
Yeah, well.
And it was the same plane off all 30 missions, right? You had.
Yeah. Actually, when we got over there, we took a brand new plane over. They flew it over. This actually happened. We got there, and well, that was going to be our plane for our missions. We get over there, well, they gave us another plane. And it was a plane that we had all kinds of trouble with. The crew that had it wouldn't fly it anymore, so they gave it to us. So we tried to fly, I think about 4 or 5 missions, and we had to abort 3 of them because engine trouble, something. We didn't get the target with it. So we actually refused to fly. We had enough missions then, and so they gave us this plane, and it had already been named Renton's Wreck by a crew. And it happened that I was born about 10 miles from where that plane was built in Renton, Washington.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it was ironic.
Yeah. I know in past history that the B-29, when it first came out, they had fires. And a lot of it was a magnesium crankshaft or camshaft. I really don't remember. But you had an experience like that with a fire on
Oh, well, yeah, we were on a daylight mission over Yokohama, which is right next to Tokyo. It is on Tokyo Bay. And we were on the bomb run. We got just about halfway through it, and we got hit pretty heavy. Plane caught on fire, and it didn't knock us down, so we continued, and we dropped the bombs with the rest of the formation, and we had to drop out of formation because the plane was burning pretty good by that time. It hit the hydraulic system, and so we dropped out, and I could still see Tokyo Bay down there. And we tried to get it out. the fire extinguishers we had on board were empty. And we found out that later that the ground crew had been using them to cool their beer with. They put them in a barrel, and right now, boy, you got cold beer.
Yeah.
And they didn't replenish them. So anyway, we finally used our drinking water and got the boards up and got it out. And they had a regular procedure for bailout on the plane, so the crew gets out. And it happens in the front part of the plane, the bombardier goes out first. And the pilot gave them order to bail out. So I never wore my chute or anything, so I put my chute on. And to get out of the B-29, you have to put the wheel down front there, and there's a ladder that goes down. And so I got my gun on and my chute and all that stuff, and I had my foot on the bottom rung of that ladder ready to go. And the navigator tapped me on the shoulder and says, "We got the fire out." To this day, I can see Tokyo Bay down there looking up at me.
Yeah.
And another time we got hit. I don't remember what target it was, but when we got back to base, we found out there was a hole in the top of our plane about the size of a tomato can, and I guess about an 80 millimeter or something went through the plane, and it must have went through when the bomb bay doors were open and on the bomb run, because there was no holes in the bottom of the plane. It was just through the top.
Wow.
And we heard something hit, but it didn't explode. It was a dud. And that was kind of scary, but not at the time, until after we found out later.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, we got hit, I think, with shrapnel, flak, or whatever, probably
Yeah,
I think
flak.
about 8 times.
Yeah.
Which
You
is-
didn't have any fighters coming at you, did you?
Well, the bombardier was also the nose gunner.
Yeah,
I had 650 caliber machine guns at control. They had a remote control on those that you had a ring like that, and you just kept the enemy plane coming in, it would frame the wingtips, and it would automatically aim the guns. And the first few missions we had quite a bit of opposition, but probably about the 10th mission, they almost disappeared because they were using them for the kamikaze planes on the fleet down in Okinawa, so they didn't bother with us. So we have very seldom saw it in the last part of the war, the fighter planes.
Yeah.
But they didn't like to come in on us anyway, especially at daylight formations, because we flew in 11 planes in a formation. Every one of them had 11 guns shooting back at them. So there was over 150 caliber shooting back at that guy.
Yeah,
He stand
yeah.
out there looking at you.
Yeah, I can understand
And
that.
if they did come in, they'd come in from 12 o'clock high like this. Because B-29 was so fast, they couldn't come in on a regular pursuit curve, which what they call a pursuit curve, where they aim their guns at you, they fishtail around like this. Well, when they do that they'd be way back there because we were so fast. Our plane was fast, almost as fast as theirs was. So when they took the courage to come in, they'd come up 12 o'clock high like this and strafe the hole. It didn't happen very often, but it did happen. That was their strategy.
Yeah. You also gave us a picture, which we're going to put on the screen here, of the surrender.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the surrender aboard the ship.
Yeah, well, we were to lead up to it on August 10th, which was 1945, was my birthday, and I was writing a letter home to my parents. It was my 22nd birthday. And it was late in the evening, and we were getting ready to fly another mission that night, another burn mission. There was we always took off about 1 o'clock in the morning on daylight missions. At night, we'd take off in the afternoon so we could get there at night. So anyway, we write this letter, and we always listened to Tokyo Rose.
Oh,
She
yeah.
always had good music, and a lot of, I would say crap. Anyway, a lot of, sometimes she hit it right out of the nose. She'd call people's names in your outfit, which, I don't know how to did that. So anyway, and she came on with a very sad voice, and she says, Japanese Imperial government was surrendering. well, you couldn't believe her anyway, but
Yeah.
so everybody, whoopee, whoopee, they postponed that mission. And with the idea that maybe it was true. Well, the first day, no, came through. The second day, no information. Third day, no information. So they went ahead and flew the mission with the idea if it was true, it would come back and officially call us back before we dropped our bombs. So anyway, so we took off. And there was 4 cities that night for the whole Air Force bombing, burden jobs. And so when we took off, we went over Tokyo, and it was all blacked out, and they had, come to find out later, they were having a coup down there. They were trying to get the emperor not to surrender, and he'd made a recording of it. And they were trying to find, this is all history now. You can find that in the History Channel. They have a deal on that, last mission. And so we dropped our bombs, and about an hour later it came through, it was official that they'd surrendered. This was on August 15th. So it was all over with. And then on VJ Day, which was September 2nd, Missouri, of course, was where they signed the peace treaty in Tokyo Bay, and they had all the planes in the Pacific that get up there for show of strength. And we figured there was around 2,200 planes.
Wow.
Nobody had an altitude or nothing to fly. They just like beehives. And you had to be careful because...
Oh, you can run into one
yeah.
another. Yeah, fly into one another.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like another thing about when on incendiary missions at night, the biggest problem there was the planes that you were flying with were at different altitudes. And at night, we flew without any lights on. So a guy above you might be dropping his bombs and tear a wing off or something, and this happened.
Really?
So it was more dangerous than the flat.
Yeah. Wow.
And the reason they used low altitude, because it was about the 14,000 feet, about when the automatic weapons would burn out. They weren't effective, and the flak was too low for them. And it's just like the daylight missions, the only thing that was effective with them was up to about 32,000 feet, and we flew at 35,000 feet for the flak guns.
Yeah. In your book, you in the book, Distinguished Flying Cross, you list all the guys that are on your crew. All your missions, you guys all stayed
Everyone
together.
yeah.
And you ever talk to any of them? Or
Well, they're all gone now.
They're all gone?
Yeah, I think the last one was about 4 years ago, my navigator.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to run into I have a son that lives in Kansas City, and somehow or another, I think it was, I don't know how it was, but I found out that he was living there too, and and I looked him up, and he was about a mile from where my son lived in Kansas City. So
Oh, wow.
whenever I went to visit my son, I'd visit with him, and he died about 4 years ago. He was the navigator.
Mm-hmm. Now you get, I'm not going to cut you short, but I've got a train of thought going here.
Oh.
And my train of thought was about, now the war ends, you've seen this, and you go back into civilian life, you've got another job.
Right.
But a few years ago, you met a fella down here in the villages. You want to tell the people about that?
There was a little article in the paper here, it was about a year ago, I guess, about this Japanese fellow that was in Tokyo on the time that we started bombing Tokyo. His family lived in Tokyo, and we used to drop leaflets telling all the cities that we bombed before, 2 or 3 days ahead of time, we dropped these leaflets telling them if they don't want to get burned, leave town, So they got one of the leaflets and they left, and this was on that first mission that we flew to Tokyo on March 9th, March 10th of 45. And so they all left. I guess they went to their grandmother's place out in the country or something, and they came back and their house was burned down. And even I guess his father had built a bomb shelter, even that was demolished. So anyway, it was a little article in the paper, so I looked him up. He lives in the villages here, and I says, Yoshi, I says, I told him who I was. I says, I think I might have been the one that burned your house down because I was on that mission.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's about 80 years old now, and we get together about once a month for breakfast or something and talk, you know. It's kind of interesting to hear him talk when he was, of course, he was 6 years old. He doesn't remember an awful lot, but things that,
I'm sure he remembers
yeah,
the
you have a
devastation.
few questions that he can answer, you know. Really nice fellow. He was very prominent. He worked for Time, what's the Time?
Magazine?
Yeah. And very well educated. He's very active in a national program now to stop all wars. The Rotary Club, he's very active in the Rotary Club, and he's trying to do it worldwide. So he's pretty active. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so maybe someday I'll get to meet him.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. And like I said, you did 30 missions. The war ends, you come home. What happened to your plane? Did they just, you don't know?
Junked.
Junked it?
Yeah.
You know, there's two flying still.
Pardon?
There's two B-29s flying
Well,
still.
they just got one
Yeah, that's the second one, but
Yeah.
Fifi is flying
I
still.
know, yeah.
That's the one we flew in.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I don't know how you guys did it. You know.
Well, you ever see the boneyards where they put all the stuff
Yeah,
out?
I have.
Tucson. Oh, they got.
Yeah.
And then there's one up in Flagstaff, Arizona. They just throw them out. Oh, it's a shame, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the second largest air force in the world is right there.
Yeah.
That's what I've been told
Yeah.
anyway. So anyway, you got out. You had a good career in doing what?
Well, I was in the automobile business for about 18 years, and then manufacturing houses and park development, mobile home park development for about 10 years, and I retired at 55. For 38 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a little story I wanted to tell you about Iwo Jima. It was just
please
kind of
do.
a humorous thing. But you know, we had landed there 3 times. If it hadn't been for that island there, I wouldn't be sitting there talking to you because we'd have been in the tree. Once it was because we were low on fuel. The other 2 times, well, one of them was where we were damaged so bad there over Yokohama. And we spent a few days there waiting for our plane to be repaired, and nothing to do but go out and hunt the Japanese, which all we had was a 45 of those things. You couldn't hit the side of a barn with one of those things, you know. Anyway, so I sat there one day, and there was a Jeep sitting next to our plane, and I said to the guys, I said, I wonder if that thing would fit in our bomb bays. See, on Guam, they wouldn't allow an air crew to check out a vehicle.
Yeah.
They had some bars down at the other end of the island that had, well, drinks for 10 cents. And so you'd end up down there after not flying your missions. You'd usually end up there. So you had a hitchhike rides down. So I said, I wonder if that thing will fit under there. So we put it under there and put the bomb shackles on it and pulled it up. And we had our own transportation. I think the Marines are still looking for that Jeep.
You commandant a Jeep. Yeah.
It wasn't hot on Guam, but it would have been.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for coming on the show, but, you know, unfortunately, we're out of time. Your generation truly is, you know, one of the greatest generation ever. I grew up with World War II veterans, and I have the utmost respect for you.
Well, you had to do what you had to do and do it again.
It ain't over till it's over, right? Yogi said that. In fact, he was in on World War II, Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
Yogi Berra, he was in on World
yeah.
War II, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's time to say goodbye, so I wish, you know, I'd like you to join me.
Yeah.
To all our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.